Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Council Community Relations and Recreation Committee meeting for March 23rd at 7 p.m. Actually, it's 7:08 p.m. We got started a little late trying to get a presentation uploaded. I'd like to call roll. The chair is Joe DeWitt Foy. I am taking over for him because he is not here in the building, but he is supposed to be on Zoom. I don't know if he could hear us. He was on a moment ago.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, he's here. Vice Chair Jim Posh is here. Councilmember Cobb is here. Let's do some quick introductions. I'm going to go around the table. I don't mean to disrespect anybody if I didn't call your name in order. But we have two individuals from OHM, our presenters this evening. We have Jeremy Height and Claire Brewer, I believe. We have Councilmember Cohn, we have Councilmember Kuda, we have Mayor Petrus, we have Director Gonzalez, we have Chief Administrator Reese, we have Gail Larson, Councilmember Gail Larson, and again, Councilmember Cobb. I think I got everybody. We have a couple members in the audience.
And I'm here too, Councilwoman Stone.
Councilmember Stone, you're not showing up on the screen, but there you are. Thank you very much for saying so. So why don't we get started?
Sure. Can you guys see the screen that we're sharing?
Yes.
That's good.
Okay, good. So hi everybody. It's good seeing folks I haven't seen in a while. It's been a really long time for some of you that we were here about a year ago. I'm going to go through this as efficiently as we can, and a lot of the guidance on this is going to be is what do you want to talk about? Because we only have an hour, and the park master plan is pretty robust. And so one thing that we're going to do when we start talking about this is actually the start of our report. So you can start to see how this thing comes together. We build our report pretty much at the middle of the project. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going over the next couple months. So we kind of have our intro, we have our everything. If you see a big pink blob, it means we got to put something there. It's just a reminder for us that this is something that has to be edited. A little bit of our table of contents. So what we did with this report is we developed a relatively robust executive summary. So the executive summary kind of highlights the key points. And then whatever you want to look at, you can dive into each section in a little bit more detail. Chapter 2 is really about the recreation, about the program side and the operations. Chapter 3 gets into the inventory assessment and recommendations of each park or facility space. 4 is our engagement summary. 5 is our implementation matrix. So the implementation matrix is just in a draft form, but that basically helps prioritize everything that we're thinking, whether it be low priority, medium priority, or high priority. And then we have our appendix. That's where all of our survey data is placed in there, all of our backup data. All this information is very extensive and very thorough for one main reason. It's all about money. So when we go after funding applications and funding sources, we have to prove to those funding sources that we did a thorough and robust planning engagement project. So I'm going to try to get through this quick because I want to get to the meat of this thing. I'm going to kind of slide out of the way so you guys can see. So we have a little bit of our project overview just to inform any of the readers. Want to understand how we can guide, inform, and develop and create a measurable plan. A lot of folks tend to ask us what goes into plans. For the most part, we have 3 major elements. One is the existing conditions. That's where we go out, collect data, look at all the information, do our assessments of all of our spaces. The second one is probably the most important. It's our public input. So that's where we're doing our pop-up sessions, our public open houses, our online surveys, to understand what does the community want or how does the community view its park spaces. The third one is the best practices. That's where we come in as planners, landscape architects, engineers, etc. Bring our expertise to the table in order to make this plan happen. And if anybody has any questions during this process, just feel free to stop and ask. One thing that came up out of some meetings last week was the determination to come up with these guiding principles. So basically, as you guys know, as decision makers, it can be hard to make everybody happy. So we want to really start to set our guiding principles up front and make sure that if we are at a conflict point, that we can make sure that everybody remembers what these things are. So the first one, recreation. We want to make sure that The activity of leisure, refreshing mind, body, and spirit through play and relaxation. Everybody recreates differently. I want to keep that in mind. Second one is the ecology. How can we be sustainable stewards to our green space and our natural spaces? The third one, which is kind of hiding right here under this, and is probably the most important, is equity. And that's where I always say this, a lot of special interest groups, they are passionate about what they do, and they're going to be selfish about it, and that's okay. If I'm very passionate about pickleball, for example, I'm really focused on pickleball. But we are in a community of many different types of people that want to do different things. So we need to think about the equity and make sure that it's an equitable plan. Okay. This is our planning process. So a lot of folks ask us, what are you doing? So if I'm at a public meeting and someone comes up and says, what are you doing for the city? And I can say, this is literally what we're doing. This is what our contract actually spells out. So we do our first phase, our project launch, our existing conditions, inventory, and assessment. That's where we're going out, gathering all this information. Second one is our engage and understanding. So there's a project website. We've had our street team leaders. We've had some pop-up sessions where we go to local places out in the community and just talk to them about the project. We've had our online community survey. And so that one, we're just going to them saying, how do you view your parks and spaces and what do you want to see in them? So we're just trying to learn from them. And then we start to build the framework in phase 3. So we had that public open house to get a little bit of additional feedback about what that framework starts to look like. And the STAR is really where we're at right now. So we're kind of at the tail end of this second round of engagement. Get as much information from that as we can. And then we're going to wrap everything up into a final plan and implementation. One thing that's important about the implementation matrix is in order to make it implementable, we got to identify responsibilities. So not only are we putting costs to everything, but we're going to try to identify who's responsible for it or who can be responsible for it. Talk a little bit about the park history. This is just for the history nuts in the room. Kind of goes back to the start of it. I'm not going to go through all this in detail because I'm trying to get to the fun stuff. Then we're going to hit a little bit of the demographic and trend analysis. That rolls into the program. So basically, whenever we're doing our recreation programs, we want to make sure as a community that we're providing the right services that the new generations want. And so there's a whole lot of data out there. The NRPA, which is the National Recreation Park Association, releases data once a year. So these are always changing. One thing we do look at is the demographic of the city, just so we understand what's going on. Looking at over to the right, these are the parks that we're looking at. Barber, Boyd, Kane, Cumberland, the community center down the road, Denison, Forest Hill, Kenilworth, Turtle Park / Tot Lot. We did not look at Shaker Lakes and the Doan Brook because there's already a plan in place for it.
Yes. I actually have a question about this because the parks that were missing to me were the school parks because the schools have a number of playgrounds and fields. So what was that decision in terms of not including that in the survey of the park system that is available to Cleveland Heights residents?
So that is actually part of our open space assessment. So one thing we're doing is a citywide open space assessment where we're looking at every open space, which includes parks, which includes libraries, which includes all the schools. Because those aren't owned by the city, we did not go in and assess all of those facilities. That was not part of the original RFP.
Is that going to be included, what the assessment that you just spoke about, is that going to be incorporated into the recommendations in any way?
Not for non-city properties. The one thing that we're doing with the open space is making sure we're identifying those and including them in our service gap. So for the open space, we did what's called a service gap analysis to identify each school, park, basically a space with a playground that has a 5-minute walk to it.
Okay.
So we can see where the holes are. So we're trying to look at what neighborhoods are lacking that basic amenity.
But that's important to me, but not the quality of that amenity.
Yeah, that for what was in the scope of the project, we did not go in and do a detailed assessment of school equipment, just city properties.
Will you clarify why Shaker Lakes wasn't included? A number of us, I think, went to actually we saw the mayor there at the community center, and a number of us asked the question, why wasn't Shaker Lakes involved in the planning?
So because there's a plan in place for it.
What is the plan?
I forget who did the plan, but from what I remember, there was already been a study performed in that area. So the original RFP for this project excluded
The
those.
public isn't aware of the plan.
Horseshoe Lake?
And there's a large horse, like, I think we really need to focus on the questions that are coming from here. This is for council, and I'll try to make sure we have some time at the end to get your questions.
So will you, I mean, it's fine, you can also share information, in an email to clarify, that would be helpful.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that would be good. I do have a concern about the school facilities specific to the pool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we also have the high school stadium, which is useful, but I think since we're sort of on the cusp of making a major investment in what seems to be Cumberland, and I know anything that has water in it is controversial and expensive and difficult to maintain, but there's a school, I mean, there is some relationship between the city and the schools. I mean, I'm just hopeful that it's going to show up in your inventory list and it gets taken into consideration somehow.
That's taken in consideration on the operations side because it's like a joint venture. So again, our contract and what we were asked to do was only look at city facilities and properties.
Okay.
Like that's all I can tell you. We weren't contracted to look at school properties or any of the joint use facilities. Doesn't mean we can't. We'd love to. So, but that's where we're at with that.
I'd like to ask about if you take into consideration walkability, because I look at that map and I can see areas where a park is a bit away from where the people live.
Mm-hmm.
So do you look at walkability at all, like the 10-minute walkability guideline that some organizations use?
Yep. So I mentioned the open space analysis a few minutes ago. We did what's called a service gap analysis. Okay. So the service gap does a 5-minute walk. So that's the walkability map.
All right.
And hopefully it shows up on the screen. The last one we presented, it was pretty light. But we can start to see some voids in 5 minutes. If you do a 10-minute in this community, it almost covers literally everything.
That's a fast walk.
Yeah. I mean, 10 minutes is a pretty solid walk for folks.
I'm not including the schools though when I look at that, because
Okay.
parks are in my mind, they have better playgrounds and in terms of my neighborhood anyway, so it's a bias. Yeah, thank you.
And if I could, because Gail happened to bring it up, I'd just like to note that while there is a plan for Horseshoe, there is no decision made on Lower Lake, and that's something that Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights continue to explore.
We have a little bit of our engagement summary on this section. How many community responses we've seen. We're still getting through our technical advisory participants, but it's in the neighborhood of 50 total. Our special interest groups, that's going to be in the neighborhood of probably 60. And then our open house that I think some of you were at that had 150 plus. All right, so getting to some of the priorities at a glance. So we're going to start from the top down, high level. Doing a lot of park master plans, this is really what we tend to see. First one is invest in the basics. How do we make sure it's dedication to the community? How do we replace aging amenities or infrastructure? And then how can we improve perceived safety? That one came up a lot in our public engagement. So system-wide recommendations, and I'm not going to read everything to you guys because there's a lot of words here. I'm just going to kind of hit on the highlights. Invest in those basics. How do we improve our parks? Make sure that we're dedicating the right time, effort, and manpower to those parks. And how do we start to upgrade some of those aging infrastructure pieces? So just for example, and I'm going to kind of hit on invest, site furnishings, comfort-driven amenities, benches, small structure or shade structures, mature trees, signage, regular maintenance, and then commitment to nature-forward design. That's just kind of getting into the details of it. So I'm not going to kind of jump in on all that. This just starts to break down, if we look at all of our spaces, what are the priorities? So we asked some of the questions in a lot of our engagement, what do people want to address first? Shockingly enough, the Cumberland pool came up. That's number one. Kane Park circulation was number 2, the community center coordination. What that means is how can the public better interact with the community center? So some complaints we got was, hey, I want to sign my kid up for football and it's not easy to do. So I'll use the term platform. Some communities will have an online platform that kind of takes care of all of that. It's an efficiency thing. That's kind of what we're talking about with that type of coordination. And then Forest Hill Trails, I think there's an opportunity there to have more hiking trails. I think the trails out there now, folks get a little lost, they're confused, the wayfinding isn't that great. I assume everybody knows that most of Forest Hill Park is in East Cleveland, so there's going to be some coordination there. And then hopefully we'll see if it stays in that.
So before you click off the what do you mean by circulation? Kane Park?
Pedestrian circulation.
Okay.
That was just some of the feedback.
The flow through. Taylor.
And then there is some of the safety concerns with the roadways, just the crosswalks, and how can we make those a little bit more pedestrian friendly?
So
Does that make sense?
walkability.
What's that?
May I ask you a
Walkability.
question?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wonder, given that, looking at your diagram, why Dennison Park was not seen as a priority, how was that decision made?
So we're not saying it's not a priority. All we're saying here is, are you looking at the graphic on the right, on the left? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
It's also one of the 4 parks that's just not mentioned. Just
Right.
curious.
So all that graphic is identifying is the size of the circle is the amount of feedback we got. So we got a lot more feedback on Cumberland. We got about the same amount of feedback on the community center as Dennison. And then a little less on Kane Park when it comes to what's the interest. And then within this quadrant, this is just where a lot of those comments were lying. So the community center is kind of hitting on all 4 of invest in the basics, upgrade amenities, perceive safety, where Cumberland was really about the basics, how to get our pullback. Dennison was sliding over a little bit into the aging amenities. Does that make sense?
Not really. I'm
So-
not really understanding why that park seems to be quite important to a lot of people. We hear about it a lot. So to have it not be a priority is a concern, I would say.
Is this is a measurement from the community, it's not an outcome from your plan, so you're not saying, I'm just trying to, I don't want to put
No, you're
words in your
totally
mouth.
correct. So right now, yes, this is a summary of our public engagement. So this is what we've heard from the public. Obviously, through our special interest group meetings that are coming up and this meeting, as well as other meetings, that can change.
And I just want to say, with the splash pad, a tot lot, and the new synthetic field, it's not like Dennison isn't getting serious attention. Plus the playground, that's like 3 years old.
And the upgrades on the pickleball courts and tennis courts.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is based on feedback, but I want to differentiate to the idea that Dennison has been getting attention.
Just to press on Councilwoman Stone's question, I think the question is, if there was so much input and there are 4 priority recommendations, like, is there a recommendation that came out of all the input on Dennison that is going to flow through the plan?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that
So this is the high level priorities across the board.
Okay.
So our next thing we do is we look at our summary recommendations for each space.
Okay.
So this is kind of those high level recommendations for each space. And then in the assessment and recommendations, it just gets into more detail.
Okay.
So we're trying to keep this executive summary, like, here's the big points. It doesn't mean this is all of them. It just means these are the highest ones that were point of interest to the community. So, for example, some of the challenges with Barbara Boyd: perceived safety, cleanliness, and ecological protection. Some of the actions: perform community walks with residents, city representatives, and security services to address the concerns with safety. Before we continue with that, I will let you know that the city of East Cleveland got a $50,000 grant from the Lake Erie Commission to do a planning study for the Caledonia Ravine. Part of that study is including a cleanup and remediation plan to figure out how to clean up that dump site, as well as some of the environmental concerns. And we're also looking at creating a hiking trail that goes through it as well. We're working on that project for East Cleveland. So just so you know that they're doing something there as well. Your guys' planning department is roped in as a project partner. So there's a lot of folks, the sewer district's involved, so on and so forth. Remove illegally abandoned material, replace shade structure, renovate the restroom building. I don't know if you've ever seen that restroom, but it's pretty scary. Transition useful ball field into a meadow to enhance ecological biodiversity. So Kane Park, and we're still going through Kane Park. So again, none of these are set in stone by any means. This is just a snapshot of where we are right now. Accessibility and safe pedestrian crossings. So, the first one's the RRFB, which is basically just a rapid rate flashing beacons, one of those push things, how we make our crosswalks a little bit more pedestrian friendly. How do we enhance the circulation? How do we enhance the tree canopy and replace some of the existing recreation amenities? That goes back to those aging ones. The implementation matrix gets detailed. This is high level. Community center. Communication scheduling platform, aging structural components, underutilized spaces and renovation for those spaces. Potentially an outdoor space for additional amenities. That's all about programming. This one's still a little bit up in the air is, where can we put a field house with synthetic turf? We don't know where that could go, but that's something that is coming out as a need from the community standpoint. Cumberland Park, we need a pool. That's if I haven't heard anything, I've heard a lot about that pool over the past year and a half. Update those facilities, replace some of the play equipment. How can we promote long-term stewardship of the tree canopy? And how do we do some better pedestrian connections to Kane Park and the community center? So I think everybody sees this potential ribbon being able to cut through. Denison. FYI, these are all alphabetical order. So just like I wanted to preface that. Some of the challenges: reduced range of amenities limit potential users. So one thing on that is, we've looking at the field. The field is locked pretty consistently. I've gotten a lot of feedback from that one saying, "Hey, why isn't it open at all for the public use?" Shade structures, shade trees, renovate parking area for improved accessibilities. There is a lot of grade change on that site. It does have some challenges. Update furnishings, enhance walking paths. The splash pad and the restroom building is in motion. So that's kind of already caught in there. Everybody was pretty happy about that. Again, the recommendations get a lot more specific and detailed in the implementation plan. So you guys stop me if you're like, hey, I don't know if that generally makes sense, or if you have other ideas. So
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
So Joe and I got a preview of this a week ago. And regarding Denison and Cumberland, one of the things that we threw out was, if we have to raise a lot of money for something for the pool,
Sure.
It might make sense to raise the money for Cumberland Pool, but also include some things to make it a more equitable project by throwing in another park in that. Okay. And I think when you got to Denison, we started talking about Denison, and although there was a lot of things that went on in Denison, if you were able to take, I don't know, maybe 20% of what we raised for Cumberland, but put it in a different community so it's more equitable, using Denison as an example, we mentioned this to you and you basically said, hey, if you could redo this park, it would be interesting because the fields are misoriented. The tennis courts aren't in the right direction. And all this stuff that, as a layperson, I had never even thought about. Even the way that the turf is, although we just put a lot of good money in that turf, it's in the wrong direction. And it's just like, that was just mind-blowing to hear that. So I kind of hope that we can kind of get that out of this.
Yeah, so just to get everybody up to speed on that, this is the challenge we have with parks that have been developed over decades and decades and decades. A lot of time there's a community need and the community needs to make a decision to put something somewhere. So what council members referencing is all of the fields are on a 45-degree. Proper orientation is north-south for the sun. So the sun's not in your eyes. for competition. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It means it's just, if you go look at most ball fields, they're always going to be north-south for that. And that's the story of my life working in park spaces. Is there's a lot of decisions that have been made in the 80s, 90s, 2000s that sometimes we have to live with, because we can look at the price tag to relocate something or remove it from the community. So maybe the community doesn't have that need anymore. Those are some of the tough decisions that unfortunately this group has to grapple with. Forest Hill Park, I don't think anybody's gonna be surprised here. Perceived safety, under-maintained trail system, enhanced maintenance, develop and maintain a mountain bike trail. That would have to coincide with East Cleveland, so I don't know how feasible that is. Assure habitat restoration with East Cleveland's efforts. We're just on both projects, so we're just gonna make sure that happens. Kenilworth Park, some of the concern, limited visibility and aging. There were some people I met at the public meeting that didn't know about some of these parks, mainly because they're there, but you just simply don't know. It's a fence, there's some vegetation in the way. So one of those standard invest in the basics is a little bit of wayfinding, like, hey, this is our park, here's a logical way of getting into it. How do we do a little bit better on the signage for those parks? Define entryways, dedicate signage, replace equipment, update the parking area, make it a little bit more efficient, enhance entryways, expand and replace the outdated lighting. Some of the lighting there is pretty interesting. And then how do we create more seating areas for folks of different generations? And then the last one is, I don't know if you guys even know about the top lot, the Turtle Park top lot. Coordinate with groups to, focus on the tree canopy, replace the aging equipment, replace the shade structure, improve maintenance and waste disposal, site furnishings, and replace the perimeter fence. So a while ago, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of design efforts was like, hey, we're going to put fence around everything. And I don't know why. That's just like it happened across the board. It's not a Cleveland thing. It's not an East Cleveland thing. It's not Cleveland Heights. It just happened. And so now it's making spaces less inviting. So when you're walking by and the first thing you come to is a fence, especially on a public space. There's been a lot of studies. New York City has had this problem for many, many decades, but they're trying to everybody's trying to bring these fences down and make our spaces a little bit more open to folks. Play area.
Okay, so I'm a mom of 5.
Okay,
But the fence comment made me wonder. I mean, part of the fence is reassurance to parents that their kids are not escaping. So what is coming instead of the fence? Because especially somewhere where a Turtle Park, is right on a pretty main street.
So you're like three thoughts ahead of me right now. Okay. Because in some instances where you do not want children to run into a street or a parking lot, fences make sense. It depends on the philosophy of the community. So there's a few park districts, big park districts we work with that will not put a fence around their playgrounds because it encourages the parents to maintain engagement with the kids. Sometimes if you put a fence around, people just throw their kids in and just kind of go to a bench and I know you have to come back here. Totally a community decision. It just depends on which way you guys want to lean.
What about keeping the dogs out as well? I mean, yes, they can still get in there, but it would at least somebody think twice perhaps about taking their dog in there to defecate.
Just for clarification for anyone who is watching, I will not take that fence down. That is by a major street. I will not take that fence down.
Yeah, good.
Has anybody said, Mayor, take down that fence?
But just so that it's clear for anyone who is
right?
watching.
I was asking the question generally also just to understand philosophically, but also practically speaking.
Yeah, in busy areas like this, it makes a lot of sense, and we would recommend it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's it on this. All right. So my question to you guys: this is the high level stuff. I'm going to give you 2 options here based on the time we have. We can dive into detail on the parks, which is our assessment facilities, or we can look at the open space conditions, which is really kind of looking at our community as a whole, seeing where the gaps are. How do we start to connect these gaps? So that's kind of where I'm going to give you the option because I'll give you a third option too, just because I like options. The third option is we can look at the rec programming. I'm not suggesting that because I don't know how much you guys care about operations and programming on that side. But there's a whole lot of information there that's very, very data driven. So it gets dry really, really fast.
I mean, I'll vote for the open space, but I would like to at some point, I mean, we also need to touch on what the process is, because I think there's a lot of input that we can and should be providing. Everything. And I'll say that as a new council member who just started in January, but the ones who have had, I'm not even sure how much exposure last administration's council had to any of this.
We voted on it, that was it. It was one of those things that showed up on our agenda, didn't have to ask, it's almost like a gun to your head, if you don't do this, we're not gonna do the project, it's like.
I'm interested in open space as well. But the others are also buckets that we need information on.
No. See what Joe wants.
Joe, you guys still online?
We're still here. I don't see Joe, but I'm still online. I defer to the group.
Joe went through it with me last week.
Oh, okay.
All right, so this is the start of our open space map. And of course, the city's oriented portrait mode and our screens are landscape mode. We've started to pull a lot of data to see what's going on here. The light gray, those are those 5-minute walk sheds you mentioned around a school or the existing parks that we have. Everything in orange, so all of these little orange dots, those are publicly owned vacant properties. So I never realized how many vacant properties the community has until we pulled this data. The blue is privately owned vacant properties or just open properties without a structure. So there's a lot of those on there. Magenta is the city property. We have a commercial area. And so what we're trying to do here is, the one thing we missed is this school here. So we're starting to see where those gaps are, or where's the potential for investment into these vacant properties. So the first question, and the one thing, we're breaking this open space assessment into 4 categories. So we're going to assess each park based on one of 4 categories. One is active recreation, which is pretty much going to fall to all of the existing park spaces, the existing fields that are out there. There's not a lot of properties that fit the criteria for recreation. Our criteria for recreation has got to be greater than 2 acres. So just put a field or something big on there. The second one, our criteria is passive recreation. We have a few criteria measures in for that. So that's going to filter out, identify which parcels are good for passive recreations. Third one is conservation, ecological conservation. Basically, which parcels aren't good for anything besides the environment. And then the fourth one is economic development. And that could be single family infill. It could be, if it's in a mixed use area, it could be some type of mixed use development. So we're looking at those 4 things. So at the end of the day, we're going to kick out a map that shows all of these parcels, where do they lie within those 4 categories based on that assessment. Do you guys agree with that? Questions?
And clarifying question, that's only the open parcels?
Open space.
Open space. So, I mean, one thing that I am struggling with is that if we're doing any sort of evaluation and assessment, not understanding of it, and particularly playgrounds, because that's where my life has been with my kids, is that, what I wanted to make sure is that every family that lives here is in walking distance of a playground that's a quality playground.
Okay.
And we've been able to have a lot of replacements of playgrounds over the years, but the school districts, some of the playgrounds are lagging in terms of that. We've had major developments like the Meadowbrook Park and the Cedar Lee Meadowbrook development where they were supposed to be, and I was on planning commission and we asked them to do this, put on some natural play space things there. I don't think that's ever happened. So those sort of natural play spaces. And so I'm having a hard time understanding how we're going to take this open space inventory and really think about all of the assets across the city as that residents can access if we're just looking at city-owned properties.
So it looks at city-owned, it's including libraries, it's including all civic spaces. So libraries, hospitals, churches. We technically included all the churches in here because some churches have playgrounds. So those are all included in that watershed analysis. The next step, and the recommendation can be like, hey, we need to focus in on what's out of our control, those spaces, and help them improvement. That can be a recommendation that comes out of this plan. Like it's at some point we have to like draw the line and say like that's a good next step, right?
Right.
So that sounds like that would be a good next step. But for this instance, we're bringing into account all of those conditions from a service area.
Right, just not, again, just to be clear, not the quality of those, right? So
Correct.
we'll have a big picture, macro view,
Right.
but not necessarily how
Yeah,
the
so
city
we
might.
don't go into each of the spaces and say this is an A, B, or C, or D quality. That would be like a next level study
And-
for the non-city stuff. The
And-
city stuff, we're doing that.
Right, and then also just related but unrelated, community gardens.
Okay.
And because there's been a lot of, we are working on infill development of housing
Right.
on many of these parcels, but we have heard from residents who are interested in community garden space, either on like a empty lot, which again, there's a tension there between development and community garden. We also have the Delmore Orchard, right? And other spaces. So is that something that you've considered of where might be a great open space, ecological only, that could be a community garden space or something like that?
Not yet, mainly because in all of our engagement, that has not came up.
Interesting.
Like all our public engagement, even the on-site survey that had that in there, it's just, that didn't come up at all. So I mean, we haven't decided to start looking at how that could work because of that.
That's usually driven by the neighbors. I mean, more than.
Yeah, I mean, normally
driven
it's a passionate group that can't use their backyard for something, so.
There's a community garden at Canterbury School, and sometimes they're associated with schools.
Yeah,
So-
my husband started the one at Fairfax, so, but I think the question was around empty lot, parcels, how would we do that? But-
Yeah, the tough part with the community gardens is it's really great when you have a passionate group that's maintaining them. As soon as that passion moves away or something changes, that comes back to the city. And so I know a lot of communities are a little wary of that because of that. But I mean, we're working with another community that we're putting a community garden in phase 1. It's right next to a library because they have programs associated with culinary. So it depends on each community and what they have.
Is there a way, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I see the gray area being the 5-minute walkability, but I'm looking at the reality of it. Is there a way that we could go in and interact offline to really blow it up so that we could zoom out and see, like, I know what my neighborhood looks like and I know what's available to my neighborhood. So you can go in and orient yourself? It's hard for me to conceptualize it this way.
Sure. Short answer is yes. So one thing I didn't mention that's part of our process and part of our deliverable is we're actively working on what's called a GIS storyboard map.
There you go.
And so what that's going to do is it basically takes everything we're doing and throws it up onto a GIS platform so you can zoom into the cloud, see what's going on.
Perfect.
We're waiting until the end to do it because we don't have all of our decisions made yet. So we're not going to start recommendations, have it live, and then be constantly updating.
Thank you.
So that's part of the deliverable package.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is this a deliverable that's available to city officials so we can play around and look at it? Or
This map
is
itself?
this online, or is this something
This
that you're still working on it?
This is just a PDF. I mean, we can put it on a big board and distribute it because it's just, right now, this is just inventory data. It's not, there's no secrets in here. We're not hiding anything. So, I mean, we can distribute that to you guys.
With the draft, with what you shared with us today, or not yet?
Yeah, we can, I mean, you're welcome to have the draft. I mean, it's in, and I'll just tell you right now, it's in draft form. Right now, the biggest thing I'm trying to make legible is the recreation side because it's a lot of text. And if you're a visual person like me and a lot of people, all that text is easy to get lost in. So we're actively working through that. But we should have that done within the next week or so. Because we have our next round of special interest group meetings next week, where we're gonna kind of be doing the same thing. But there's no reason why we can send it to the planning department and let them kick it out to you guys.
Yeah, I think we need to go to the administration before we get to us, but it'd be helpful to see some of these things, just to noodle on them a little bit. That could be made available to us.
Absolutely.
Is there still an opportunity for the public to provide input?
So we have a project website. So I literally got a comment, yesterday? This morning. So folks can go in, fill it out, email it, and send that in. Now, the other thing that what we're going to do is we have that project website so we can bring in that storyboard map to it. So then once that goes live, there's probably going to be a period where we could ask for additional feedback on that if we want to.
Where the project website is off of our city website, or
No,
is that
it's its own domain.
okay? What's
I
the
think
domain?
is it clevelandheightsparks.com? Or CH Parks? We can include, when we email that out, we'll include the link.
Well, I'm just thinking of anyone who's going to watch this
Yeah, it would be good to-
subsequently to be
yes.
able to say it publicly so
Sure.
they can visit.
Absolutely.
chparksplan.com.
chparksplan.com. Say really loud for the microphones. Thank you.
And we are actively updating that as this thing progresses. So keep that in mind. Any other questions or thoughts? You know, we're still in a draft phase. This is still a lot of decisions to be made.
So I do have some, and it kind of comes back to sort of what you were engaged to do for the city and versus all the other assets that we have, including Shaker Lakes, including the pool. My dream would be, again, an individual person, not speaking as a council or anybody of authority or anything, but it seems to me when you're looking at wayfinding, it's inclusive of all those other things besides city assets. And I don't know if that means we're taking I don't think it means we're taking responsibility of it, but I mean, if we have on our website, these are all the playgrounds, we're including, church playground, which in my world, that's Fairmont Presbyterian, not Fairmont, it's St. Paul's church. And because it was a place that our kids would go. It was walkable. It was a little bit closer to Roxelle. And then the amenities that we're going to find at Shaker Lakes, certainly the ones that are known today from Horseshoe and that renovation project. Indoor pool. I mean, these are things when you sort of list as a community member, you want to move into Cleveland Heights, you want to see it all there in one place. And, we're the leader of that. And we have hopefully relationships with the schools for that.
So the one thing that was asked during our last special interest meeting, which had a couple council members in it, was we talked about connectivity. And you guys have already done an active transportation plan. You've already done an SS4 plan, which is your sidewalks. We are going to overlay that data onto our maps. So when we do get to the GIS storyboard map, we can at least see all of these spaces, our watershed analysis, and then we're just going to layer that data right on top for what that connectivity could be. I'm not a big fan of redoing plans, so we're just going to take it, slap it on, and make it legible. So that'll be part of that end product too, from a connectivity standpoint.
That'd be wonderful.
So just shifting gears a little bit to recreational programming.
Oh boy.
Now, you talked about the operations. Are you identifying gaps in either ages or types of programming? And If you are you looking at neighboring suburbs? Like, talk to us about how we're evaluating the programming that we're offering to residents.
So for that one, the first part of your question, the answer is yes. So we went in and spent a whole day with the staff to figure out what's working well and what's not working well, and came up with some high-level recommendations based on that. Everything is based on the demographics. So I mentioned at the beginning of this demographic and trends analysis. So we know what's going on with the community. We already have some projections that's based on census data on how to do that. So all of that is focused on Cleveland Heights. We don't take into consideration East Cleveland, City of Cleveland, Shaker Heights, or University Heights. It's purely just literally focused because from a data standpoint, we got to draw a line somewhere, or else you just keep making it bigger, and the data keeps getting bigger and bigger. So that's how those recommendations are coming light in here. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, it begs the question for me. We offer at Cumberland Pool a few nights during the summer separate gender swimming. And that is because of the sensitivities of both the Muslim population in Cleveland Heights and also the Orthodox Jewish population. So, and also thinking about programming, a lot of the recreational programming is offered on Saturdays, which Orthodox Jewish families cannot attend. And then there's also, other limitations, just sporting limitations and timing limitations and senior. There's so many groups that have very unique needs. And so I'm curious, how do you know that you've reached everyone in the demographics to be able to really assess like our programming? Because it's only the people, frankly, that maybe affirmatively opt in to these public sessions or a survey. We're still always going to be missing those that don't opt in.
I didn't pull it up. So we pull what we can from the US Census. So when it comes to those demographics, just off the top of my head, I don't think they get into that detail, which is a little bit of the problem. And then what's left is relying on our special interest groups and try to get that engagement directly. So thus far, we haven't gotten a lot of feedback from those communities about what their specific needs are. Now, the other thing is those requests may be very detailed. Like it may be about scheduling, where we're trying to figure out, do we have the right amount of facilities for the community as a whole? As like the first, let's solve this problem first, make sure that we get a new pool or we know how to coordinate a pool with the schools, for example, before we start to figure out some of those super detailed ones. So I think there's a lot of problems up here to get to, and then there's the next layer of problems that would be the next step.
Well, yeah, and I guess, your thoughts, because there's also a lot of, sport, like you said, the sports groups, they're going to be vocal about their sports. So how are you assessing if you're hearing from all of the groups that have some sort of desire, right, for assets, at the community center?
So the challenge with that is, we try to filter that out of the survey. So a lot of the survey questions are basically gauged to ask interest. So do you have children? Are they interested in these sports? So we're trying to get that information out of those survey results so we understand, all right, what's the trend for those type of youth sports? So if I pulled up the demographic and trends analysis, right now there's certain sports that are on a decline. There's certain ones that are on an uphill. And we have all that data. Great example. Pickleball is going up like 100 to 200%. That's the one where you just when you see the chart, it's just yep, that's pickleball. There's some other ones that are kind of flat. There's some other ones that are turning red and turning orange. We rely on that, tailor it with the community engagement to see what's going on. And normally the passionate groups that are really invested show up to the meetings. Or we're talking to the program directors that have, hey, I have 15 teams and we only have so many fields, for example. We're scrambling to find fields, or we're scrambling to find usable fields because they're in poor condition. Right now it's people want to swim, but we know the pool's in a little bit of a struggle. So, that's we're getting more feedback about that. So a lot of what we do is when we're asking questions, we're tracking how many hits that question's getting, because that's also given us a gauge as to where people's interest lies. Because the survey kind of gave people some options. You could literally just only survey it on each park or all the parks.
I did take the survey and don't quite remember did it address ADA adaptability for these parks, for sports programs, for those people who need to have special needs met if they want to take advantage of a program?
So you mean just from a purely accessible standpoint or from a facility availability? Or from a program standpoint?
Yes, adaptability for that individual who may need.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't think we got into that detail. I mean, a lot of the accessibilities was basically the space itself,
Sure.
not how can the accessibility impact the program. That's like getting into a little bit more of a detailed operation side of things. So the one thing we did here is we did like a program assessment and recommendations. We did what I call an operations light plan, where we're just touching on operations. Some park systems, they will hire a firm like ours to do a full-blown operations plan. That's not what we're doing here. That's like getting into the weeds of the programming on that side.
If I could just add one thing, is that although, you know, this parks plan, when it's all done, I've really enjoyed, you know, communicating with OHM and learning a lot of different things, as, you know, I'm still fairly new to Cleveland Heights and whatnot. But the one thing that I did want to add is that myself as a director of Parks and Recreation, I don't need a parks plan to understand some of the things that are missing from Parks and Recreation right now. We fully understand that, like, we're lacking in youth programming. We fully understand that we're lacking in, you know, adaptive programming and different things like that. We fully understand that there's some struggles if we do things on Saturdays. A good chunk of the community can't do things, but then if we do it on Sunday during certain times, a good chunk of the community can't do things. So these are all things that we don't need a Parks and Rec master plan to understand those things, and we do understand them. There's a balance that we try to do, trying to bring programming in, and then also trying to keep Cleveland Heights as a whole as well too. So I just wanted to bring that up, is that we do see a lot of those things internally, and we are looking to address those things. We don't need the master plan to understand those things, and we're looking to address those things before the Parks and Rec master plan even hits our table. So.
Have you had, I know you've been working with OHM, but have you and your staff have been a focus group or a?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've probably been one of the main focus groups and whatnot, because
I would think so.
Yeah, and then the nice part about it is, like, our staff, you know, when we're not just talking full timers, we're including part timers and everything, because on our staff we have the Jewish population, we have African Americans, we have, you know, younger kids, we have senior citizens. So our staff alone is very diverse, that we could pull a lot of different good ideas from them as well too.
So we're on the verge of running out of time. Is there any other questions that we want to throw out or save, put it in an email or something?
If you have any, you can email Andres or the administration, and it'll work its way back to us.
Sounds good.
Is just for the public, is the survey done? So the only way that they can do input is through a website form, is that correct?
The survey's
Okay.
closed, yes.
Okay, just wanted, because people were talking about a survey, I don't want them to be.
Sure.
Yeah,
No, I get it.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Let's adjourn this meeting now.